John Gormley, live.
Where Saskatchewan comes to talk.
NewsTalk 980, CJME.
I'm John Gormley. Welcome to this hour of the radio program, my friends, and appreciate you checking in here wherever we find you, or more importantly, where you find us today, one of the great radio stations that carries this program, or you're podcasting, you found us online. Appreciate you being here today. Interesting conference coming up in Saskatchewan about a month from now, and we're going to check in with the guy who is going to be the keynote speaker. The conference is called Sask 3.0 Summit. Now, you can find out a lot more at sask3summit.com. April 24th, 25th at Regina's Queensbury Convention Center, and they're pulling together experts from this country, from the U.S., from Australia, and the whole position is to ask the questions and get the right answers for making sure we meet some of the technological challenges that lie ahead in the world of a wired computer world, the net, both the hardware imperatives, in other words, the equipment we need, but also, and more importantly, what we're doing to make our communities more efficient, our businesses more efficient, and Saskatchewan, as the conference implies, at a 3.0 level. Now, one of the many speakers, but the keynote speaker in all of this is a man who's presently a fellow at Harvard University, Vivek Kundra, but he was the first U.S. Chief Information Officer, appointed by President Obama to that position. Prior to that, he had worked for Governor Kane in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and also the Chief Technology Office in D.C., the District of Columbia. We find Vivek Kundra this morning in Austin, Texas. Vivek, thank you for taking our call.
John, thank you very much for having me today.
Explain to me, when you talk about some of the technology challenges based on your work as the CIO in the White House, what are some of the challenges that you're going to be enumerating at this convention here in Western Canada?
Well, one of the main challenges I'm going to be talking about is how you transform government to be open, transparent, and participatory. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the history of civilization, you could go back to the Agora, where people used to convene in the public square to petition their government, to conduct commerce, and to socialize. The challenge has been that over the course of multiple revolutions, from the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution and the digital revolution, what we're seeing is a fundamental shift in how people can engage their government. With access to mobile technologies and access to the web, you can be part of the digital public square. And that means that governments around the world, and Saskatchewan especially, have an amazing opportunity to open themselves up by democratizing data and by engaging people in ways that were structurally impossible in the past.
When we look at some of these approaches government is taking, there is the sense, on different government websites, different web interaction, really more just, a Q&A or almost like a brochure or a pamphlet. How do you go that next step where you can actually log into government to have that look?
Well, let me give you some examples from my experience working at the city level, state level, and at the federal government level. One of the biggest movements that's taking place right now is this open data movement. So when I was the Chief Technology Officer of the city of Washington, D.C., what I decided to do was democratize data on every aspect of government operations, from the police department to what was happening with the health department and libraries and the permitting entities. And we literally just put up all this data online, and I launched this competition called Apps for Democracy. And I challenged for $50,000 innovators, citizens, to create applications in the interest of public service. And in 30 days, we had 47 applications that were amazing apps that would have cost the government billions and millions of dollars to actually develop. And I noticed this amazing shift in power away from the hands of a few bureaucrats to the average person, to people who could not hold their governments accountable by using this information. For example, we had data on public service around credit card transactions. So every time a government official would buy something, you could see on a real-time basis what they were buying. We had data that we put out there on how much the government was paying consultants on an hourly basis, data on the performance of schools on a real-time basis, data on crime around cities on a real-time basis. And we began to see something really interesting happen, which was that these citizen developers and journalists and watchdogs started uncovering and creating value at the intersection of multiple data sets that we couldn't even imagine. At the federal level, we were able to launch something similar called data.gov that allowed third parties to create some really innovative apps. One of the applications that was created was an app that took all the instances in hospitals where products, such as toys or cribs had caused accidents, and made that information available to the point where somebody developed an app for the iPhone where an expectant mother could go to a store and scan a crib to see if that crib had been recalled or not. We had an app that was developed by citizens that would allow you to see before you checked into a hospital what the mortality rate of that hospital was and how those nurses were rated. That is the fundamental shift when you begin to open up government and tapping into the ingenuity of the citizens of a country or of a city or of a state.
Vivek Kundra is with us. Boy, I can see the resistance at an institutional level for obvious reasons, but where do genuine privacy interests come into this?
Well, so one of the key privacy concerns, of course, is around when you release this data, making sure you're releasing it at the right abstraction level. And what I mean by that is if you have healthcare data, it's one thing to release it at a national level or even at a state or province level, because from that perspective, there are plenty of people where you can't identify somebody. But when you begin to release that data at a town or a county or a zip code level, there are privacy challenges because you may have a rural part of the country where very few people may have a condition that can be identified. So there's this notion of what I call the mosaic effect, the ability to take data from Facebook and from government entities and try to identify people. But there is an amazing side of this equation where there are a number of de-identification technologies and also making sure that you're being thoughtful in releasing that information so it doesn't in any way compromise privacy of the people you serve or national security for that matter.
So when you look across the U.S. states you've dealt with and you start to apply this to the Canadian context, are there advances happening in Canada, or I guess alternatively, where are the leading edge advances going on now?
Well, so absolutely. Canada is moving forward with an open government agenda to begin to democratize that data. I think the key is going to be very, very aggressive, so you could speed up the time at which you democratize this information. You create a culture of a more open, transparent, participatory government. Part of the challenge is historically, if you think about most institutions, for too long they've looked at citizens, and the relationship has very much been about those who govern and those who need governing. In this new model, this new digital public square, you actually turn that upside down, and essentially the people of a country can now all of a sudden engage in co-creating solutions to some of the toughest problems you might face. We're seeing some amazing stuff happen, whether it's in cities around the United States or what's going on in the UK around the open data movement, or some of the work in Australia, for example, and Japan is doing some really, really interesting things. I think there's an amazing opportunity now to take this to the next level beyond just releasing data. The key is going to be to build the ecosystem of innovators that can create these interesting applications that people can use, but also think about it not in the context of just people holding government accountable as watchdogs or creating better services, but you can also create an entrepreneurial community to build the next billion-dollar companies on top of this open data.
Boy, you've the great thought-provoking stuff. Vivek Kundra, thank you for this, and look forward to meeting you when you're here.
Great. Looking forward to the conference, and I'll see you there. Thank you.
Vivek Kundra joining us in Austin this morning.